Welcome everybody to actually the first of this 2-week Festival of Better Ideas from the RCA Service Design course, and most importantly students. My name's Clive Grinyer. I am the Head of Service Design here at the Royal College of Art. And as I say, this is the first student showcase day of what we're calling the Festival of Better Ideas. And if we didn't have better ideas, why would we bother? But today is the first of 6 showcases of the students' work. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the course and a very rapid run through of some of the rich and varied projects that we have here that we're showcasing this week and next week. And then we're going to focus in tonight on 6 particular projects around urban living, a bit of a catch-all for things around cities, around spaces, around data. You'll see as we get into the detail. For those of you who are new to the service design course, this is actually only the 7th cohort to pass through it. It's been going, it's in its 9th year, and it was set up by Nick de Leon at a time when service design was emerging as a new design discipline. It's the application of human-centered design thinking, system thinking, looking at the big picture, but using the methodologies of design to visualize and prototype. And the course has become a really pioneering force across the industry. And every year our students go into technology companies, into businesses, into financial services, and to public services, government, ministries, departments in government. They've had a huge impact already. Right now we have 140 students across 2 years of this master's course. I like to describe them as the antidote to many aspects of life that push solutions on us without asking the right questions first. And I think that creates a lack of trust and damages our expectations of the future world. It's the purpose of this course to make the world work better. Here are some of the students, my first day back in September when I joined as head of the course. And that was a combination of first and second years. You get a feel for the incredible international diversity as well as the diversity of disciplines. Of course, now the course is very much on Zoom. This was the day of the final exam when everyone had got through it. And I'm glad to say that everybody passed. And it has, of course, been a period of incredible resilience, incredible creativity, that the students have reacted so well, as you'll see in the projects. They've learned how to use the digital tools that allow them to reach out to communities on social media, to have the workshops, to prototype and validate their ideas, which they've done supremely well. It has clearly been a tumultuous year. They have responded magnificently, but we've carried on asking the big questions about, you know, how can we continue to understand the biases that is in AI, the technology, challenges ahead of us? How can we look at communities, how we work, stay healthy? And these are the themes of the show as we go through. But this is a really special year. They're really special students and they're ready to have their impact. We have, for the first time, an online show, the RCA 2020 show, where you can go and look at individual students. They forgot to ask us how we wanted to present. And of course, we tend to present in teams. So you see a little bit of duplication there. But all the students' work is there, as is the whole work of the college, which is an incredible inspiration, 850 or so students graduating. We have our own site, which we set up as an archive for all the incredible project work that's coming through, but we've been able to repurpose it really as a way to look at the projects that are there and theme them. And the themes will be represented each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this week and next week. And this gives you a little brief run through. We have a series of projects on human condition, which is a catch-all for society and culture. Projects by Beatrice Mantelstadt and Jess Stein with IKEA on a speculative future of sleep. A fantastic project about rethinking how we design products. Rosa Fernandez with Is This Love? It's a platform for people in emotionally abusive relationships. Cami Shah worked with the V&A to use museums, develop our use of museums as a therapeutic environment to help relationships. Across Silo, Emilia Durazio and Soumya Singhal, apologies, working with Barking and Dagenham Council to join up their services with the practitioners and local authorities. Lydia Lee with DOT, data science platform to create personalized activities for children, for hassled parents. Kiyohiro Izumo with Bump Into, which is a music platform for early stage musicians to support music innovation. Everyone is a project by UNU. It's a toolkit for children with special needs for teachers and classrooms. Radhika Agrawal and Fanghu Song created Nurture with Camden, London Borough of Camden, to empower seniors to engage their communities and promote intergenerational engagement, wisdom to youth. And Project Next is an audio chat room connecting students who are planning to travel abroad with students who already have traveled abroad. And it currently has almost 100,000 followers on TikTok, one of the great pivots that's happened during this weird time. Students have a passion for the climate, of course, and we have 5 projects around there. We have Christina Magolan Garcia with Anulu, which is working with consumers to change their behavior to more sustainable fashion. Yuxing Li, or Mimi, has worked in Shanghai with Precious Shanghai, looking at recycling of plastics, and has created a cat avatar called Mimi, who wanders around identifying sustainable businesses that people can go and use. Constant Chung has created Birdie, about appreciating nature in your neighborhood, taken from walks with her father when she was a kid. An absolutely beautiful project about understanding the world around us. And Ruton, Constance and Rosa worked on sharing knowledge of products that you can make from food waste. Rosa Blouse created Climate 101, an absolutely amazing project to put climate environmental content into every university course, working with Westminster, with Imperial and with Delft to find course content and share that, whether it's English or history, as well as science and engineering. And finally, Ming Dong Shin and Hang Yu Kim created, and I can never see the title, Suplin. You can never see the title because all your pictures are covering it, which is again about sustainable fashion, but working on the supply chain and showing transparency of environmental sourcing. We have 5 financial service projects. We have Carl McDonald with Evergreen, a sustainable investment club. We have Purchase Power with Tammy Tang, Shanshang Li, and Binhai Wang, using open banking, excuse me, forgot to click, using open banking to improve your affordability, to get loans easier, improve your credit score. Money Buddy is from Tina Chu. It's banking for customers with vulnerable health, mental health vulnerabilities, helping them become less stressed in dealing with money. Mobius is a project from Haijin Bei and Jade Meng, and it's for a private bank we're not allowed to talk about, but it's about investment programs and private banking for a new generation. And the Lab Y by Zhoquan Li and Runa Yu is financial education and literacy for 5 to 12-year-olds. We're going to be hearing about urban living today, so I don't need to introduce you to these projects yet, because these are the ones you're going to hear from later on. We have 2 projects on the future of work and around skills. We have Nayang Lucia Lee and Rong Hua with Meta, which is an amazing project about helping people understand their workplace and their capabilities as a forest. And we have Cecilia Santucci with Disrupting Cultural Powerhouses. She's using art organizations to create training for corporates to help them understand diversity and empathy for their employers, and also make their own arts more sustainable. The final theme, we have Living Well. We have Tarek Helmi and his project for carers of dementia patients. And we also have Shuning Wang and Sally Zhu with Carepanion, which is caring for end-of-life carers. We have Gina Kim and Haijin Lee with Talk and Brew, Started off as a vending machine that taught you mental health as you waited for your tea to brew, now become a digital version of that, how to have tea and reflect and de-stress and overcome loneliness. We have Pinya Piponin and Alessandro Peon with Household Health, creating safe environments in flat shares during a time of pandemic, this one and future ones. And finally, Agata Jaskavich with Nutrition in collaboration with CERN. She was one of the prize winners of the Grand Challenge, an app to help you with healthy eating. So thank you for your patience. But there are, I think, 33 projects there, every one of which is an incredible story, an incredible project with incredible partners. And I really encourage you to look at our sites and use the Calendly links and use the Zoom links to go and have conversations with the students who've set those projects up. Right, now it is time to introduce our speaker today, Carolyn Steel, a leading thinker on food and cities. You may well have seen her TED talk. Hello, could somebody go on mute, please? I would appreciate that. Thank you. And her lecture series on food and the city at the Cambridge University School of Architecture. She published her first book, Hungry City, in 2008, and she's just published her second book, Utopia, How Food Can Save the World. So I'm really, really delighted to welcome Carolyn to speak to us. And if I can find out how to stop sharing, there I am. I will hand over to you, Carolyn. I don't know if you have any slides to share, or
I do have slides. Yes, yes.
Great.
Many, so I'm going to have to be even faster than you, I think, probably.
Are you good at screen sharing?
I've done it, so I'm sure
can
I
you
can
see
do it again. I will do it.
At the bottom there, we have the
voila.
Share screen. That's it. And then when you get your slides up, you go to sort of presentation. There you go. And if you go to your PowerPoint present button, that's looking perfect. Thank you, Carolyn. Over to you.
Great pleasure. Well, many, many thanks, Clive, for inviting me. And it's a great honor to be the first virtual guest to the end of year show for the design service design course, which I have to say looks absolutely amazing. And I really can't wait to see the projects today. And I want to learn more about the other ones as well, which just all look really fantastic. I'm just going to very, very briefly talk to you about Utopia, which in a way, I think is extremely relevant to the kind of work that the service design program does actually, because Utopia just means food place, and I'll explain how I sort of came up with this term and sort of what I think it's good for. In essence, what I think it's good for is thinking in a systems way, a systems-based way, about a whole range of problems that we face globally, which essentially I think is what your course brilliantly does. How did I sort of come up with the idea of this word and basically the idea effectively of using food as a lens to see the world? Well, it kind of starts with this image, really. I mean, I remember seeing this beautiful image, the Lorenzetti Allegory of the Effects of Good Government, when I first went to Siena as a sort of architecture student, sort of a horrible number of years ago, probably 40 years ago or something, and looking at it and just thinking, well, that's a lovely image of Siena, beautiful city, beautiful landscape, and so on. And it now seems incredible to me that I never realized that what this image is really about is food. So, I mean, I could go in detail, but you can just see sort of huntsmen leaving the city to go maybe shoot a boar. You can see asses coming into the city with grain on their backs, a pig walking to market. Inside the city, flocks of sheep wandering around, a woman with a basket of eggs on her head, and so on. And what you can also see is that the arrangement, the very arrangement of the image, is giving equal weight to the city and to the countryside, which when you look more closely at it is a highly modified countryside. This is not just nature, this is actually a landscape that's been modified to feed the city. And then you look again at the title of the work, The Allegory of the Effects of Good Government, and it's fairly clear what this is saying, this image. It's basically saying, and by the way, it sits in the council chamber, the main council chamber in Siena. It's saying to the councillors of the city, well, you know, if you look after the countryside, it will look after you. And the ideal of this is really to achieve a balance between city and country. And I suppose, once you realise what this image is really about, certainly once I realised what it was about, I just wondered why I didn't see that it was about food before. And I think the reason I didn't see it is that food is too big to see. It's literally everywhere in our world. It shapes our minds, our bodies, our politics, our economics, our cities, our landscapes, the way we spend time during the day. And simply, if it weren't for food, we wouldn't be here. Indeed, we are the food that we've eaten in our lifetimes. That's what we're actually made of. So food is this extraordinarily wide and wide-ranging entity, if you like, that shapes our world. And yet we, in a sense, we don't see that. So I guess my idea really is kind of, well, what would the world be like if we did see it? Now, again, the mystery of why don't we realise our world is shaped by food? Well, one of the reasons, obviously, is that, today we don't look out of the window and see the landscape that feeds us anymore. It's often thousands of miles away. And it's often a very denatured landscape like this one on the right-hand side that you wouldn't necessarily want to stick in a painting anyway. So we've become very distant, both mentally and physically, from the landscapes that feed us, because, of course, these days, most of us, the majority of us, live in cities. I call this the urban paradox, because basically we think of ourselves, as humans, we think of ourselves as urban. Oh, I live in a city. But actually the paradox is that because we're actually animal and our sustenance needs to come from the natural world, in a sort of deeper sense, we actually dwell on the land. And the best term I've come across to really describe our dilemma, you could say, as to how to live as humans, is this one of Aristotle's. That's Aristotle in the middle. And Aristotle called us political animals. And I love this term. You may have heard this term. I mean, what I use this term to really talk about is the essential duality that we face when we're trying to work out how to live. Because on the one hand, we're political, which means we need society, which is why we gather together in cities in order to be together. And of course, that's the agora of Athens. So Aristotle lived in a polis or a city-state. But also we need the natural world for our sustenance. And there's just a duality there, which really we have to somehow face. It is indeed the basis of the urban paradox, if we're going to find out or learn to live well on the planet. At the basis of it is really the oldest shared question that we have as humans, or shared practical question in any case, which is the question of how to eat. You could say it's the greatest question that all living creatures face in one form or another. As far as being human is concerned, and this is really, I guess, where the question of our relationship with nature as mediated by technology becomes most evident in our history. So round about 1.5 million years ago, nobody's quite sure, our ancestors learned how to control fire. This was a complete game changer because it allowed them to start cooking their food, which meant they could take a lot more calories on board very easily, which meant they could specialize in hunting, which meant that they could actually really enrich their diet very rapidly. And with the discovery of fire, our ancestors' brains grew very, very rapidly in a very unprecedented way. Now, there's so much I could say about this picture, because in a sense, you could say that our hunter-gatherer ancestors really solved the problem of how to live as political animals by dwelling in nature. They literally lived in the larder effectively, and they created these extremely sophisticated, actually very egalitarian societies that were all based around the shared meal. So the shared meal, if you like, represented the band's wealth, and also was the result of the work that everybody had done during the day to put it together. And so I like to say, in a sense, that the shared meal is the first and, so far, in my view, best economy that we've ever invented as humans. And of course, around the campfire, we also evolved, language and sharing and, the ability to behave like civilized beings. So it's an absolutely essential step in our evolution. Now, all that you could say on one level slightly went to pot when we started farming. And again, I'm skipping hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, but basically, suffice it to say that over time, we morphed from hunter-gathering, which is basically following the food around, to planting seeds in the ground and waiting for them to grow, so farming. It's a very different way of being in the world. Instead of kind of following the food, you basically put the food on the ground, invest work in the ground, and then protect it and stay put. So we get the evolution of static settlements and eventually cities. So agriculture and urbanity co-evolved is a really important thing to know. And secondly, if you look at one of the first cities ever built, which is the city of Ur in ancient Mesopotamia, we notice a pattern that was to be repeated all over the ancient world, which is that most cities were very small, very dense. So that's an example of the residential fabric, surrounded by farmland. So we're actually talking about a city-state, which is basically a blob of urbanity surrounded by productive countryside. On rivers, ideally, because that's where you get the water to irrigate your land, and interestingly dominated by a large temple complex that not only organized the harvest, which was the most important administrative convulsive moment of the year, offered the food up to the gods, stored it in the temple granary, baked it in the temple bakery, and then redistributed it during the course of the year. So we can say basically the world's first cities basically fed themselves by being city-states and by having what we would now call a large centralized food distribution hub. But what's interesting as well, and very important actually about this development in the way we ate and lived, is that a hierarchy develops. So whereas in the hunter-gatherer society, the best hunter was basically the sort of tacit leader of the group, but it was a very egalitarian organization here very early on. The keepers of the temple, who effectively controlled the food, had most of the power, and the people actually producing the food had very little. So we get, if you like, a sort of a weird inversion in which the people doing the really useful stuff, i.e. producing food, actually have low status. And we've actually pretty much lived with that ever since. Most ancient cities followed that model, but famously Rome bucked the trend. In fact, I call it City 2.0 because it really went the other way. So instead of being small and compact, Rome was vast and sprawling, as you can see, and indeed is estimated to have had 1 million citizens by the 1st century AD. So the question then arises, well, how did a city the size of Rome feed itself? And the short answer is with food miles. So ironically, although we think of food miles as a modern phenomenon, and indeed a lot of our food does travel thousands of miles to reach us, that is not a new phenomenon, because a city the size of Rome would have in fact been unable to feed itself from its local hinterland and had to rely on sea imports from as far away as Egypt, or indeed even London, where it imported oysters from, in order to feed itself. And in fact, you could say that the expansion of the Roman Empire was effectively one large militarized shopping spree or land grab, as Rome sequentially defeated Sicily and Sardinia, and then Carthage, and very famously Egypt, because these were primary grain producing regions. And grain was and always has been the food of cities, by the way. So effectively, we can see how a city the size of Rome really, through its appetite, modified a vast landscape, and ultimately, by the way, ate itself to death, because after 300 years of just sucking all the nutrients out of North Africa and not putting any back, eventually all of these soils became depleted, disastrously depleted, and it really signaled the end of the Roman Empire. So there's many interesting questions, or rather sort of ideas that we can get from our food history. Not only did cities modify the landscape that fed them, but also were modified by the food coming into the city, as we can see from these amazing maps of London, where I've just basically coloured in the streets according to where the food was coming in. So grain is yellow, and most of the grain was coming in by river because it's heavy and bulky, travelling up to the centre of the city, Cornhill, where it was traded and being traded on the way. So you can see Bread Street, for example, is where bread was being traded. Fish is also coming in by river. Famously, Billingsgate remained London's main fish market until the 1980s. Friday Street is where you bought your fish on a Friday when the eating of meat was forbidden. But meat is walking into the city, so it's not coming in by river, it's actually coming in from the north, gathering in a smooth field outside the city, which remains London's meat market to this very day, extraordinarily. And before, the railways looked a bit like this, because all the animals were actually physically walking into the city. And indeed, if you lived in a city before the age of railways, you couldn't not know where your food came from, because it was literally mooing and buying and in your face. And I'm going to have to speed up as usual. Anyway, that was a very, very short, but not quite short enough, description of the relationship, of the way food and cities co-evolved before the Industrial Revolution and before the invention of this game-changing invention, the railway, which really blew apart the whole geographical relationship between cities and land, because it made it possible for the first time to transport food rapidly over long distances. So things change very, very fast. The first thing is that cities themselves are able to grow much bigger very rapidly. They become metropolitan splurges like Rome. Secondly is that the landscape itself is transformed. So that's the American Midwest before railways, and that's the American Midwest after them. Basically 60 million bison estimated were just kind of destroyed in the space of less than a decade. Native Americans were moved off the land, and this is what we got instead. There was, for the first time, a global grain glut, so the invention, if you like, of cheap food, because there was so much grain people could afford to feed it to animals, which, by the way, they're not designed to eat. So we get the invention of cheap meat. And then basically the model rolls on, cars come along, and you get the creation of the least dense cities in the world, which you'd almost sort of struggle to say, is this really a city? The replacement of the old market by sort of boxes outside the city that you drive to, and ultimately a very distanced relationship between us and food, and indeed the denaturing of food itself. Now, the system seemed to be working perfectly well until about, well, if you didn't think about it, that is, until a few months ago, when people in the West woke up to the shock of finding their local supermarkets had run out of food, thanks to the buying spree that accompanied lockdown due to COVID. But actually, as I say, if you had been looking at the way we fed ourselves, you would have realized it was really problematic anyway, because we had massive land degradation, huge climate change emissions, the loss of the use of 70% of global available water, a lot of it from non-renewable sources, diet-related disease, so obesity and hunger, eutrophication of lakes by excess runoff from chemicals, food waste, the waste of grain being fed to animals rather than humans, huge amounts of energy being consumed, and ongoing extinction caused by chemical farming. The point being that there is no such thing as cheap food, and we kind of got here, which is a really bad place to be. And as I say, COVID is really interesting because it's kind of highlighted some of the things that we already knew. So, for example, the mass exodus of rural migrants in India that accompanied lockdown, about 47 million people trying to get back to their villages. So a sort of instability there, and instability in our relationship with nature, which is responsible for the outbreak of COVID and other zoonogical pandemics as well. The fact that we have unhealthy workplaces where it's difficult to control the outbreaks, the fact that, for example, in places like Britain, because we don't have migrant labour, we can't pull the food out of the ground, and unemployment, the question of what to do with city centres, the exposure of social injustice on so many levels, and of course, ongoing climate change with all of this is not making go away. So I think, again, sort of following this path, it becomes clear that we've got to the point where we need a major rethink. And I love this wonderful formulation of Cedric Price's, which is technology is the answer, but what was the question? And I think if you ask that question, what you realize is that it hasn't changed in thousands of years. The urban question, if you like, is how do we keep this thing going? How, as political animals, do we dwell? The Greeks worried about how big the city grew because they thought it should feed itself. Thomas More basically tried to replicate the city-state model with his Utopia, and Ebenezer Howard did the same with railways. So all of these utopians are actually thinking about what the relationship between the city and the countryside should be. And really that was the inspiration for my word Utopia, because utopia is a good place, but it can't exist. And so I realized by this point, I'd been studying the way food shapes cities for about 7 years by this point. This is back in 2006, probably earlier. Anyway, and I thought, well, but food shapes our world, so maybe we should just say that we live in a Utopia, from the Greek sitos for food and topos for place, and then what does that tell us? What can we do with that? Well, basically, very, very rapidly, what it means is that the way we eat shapes our landscape. So that's cows eating grass as they evolved to do. That's a CAFO, that's 160,000 cows walking around in their own poo, being fed grain and getting sick and being pumped with antibiotics. Do we meet in city centres through food, and does it animate public space, or do we leave in the name of convenience? Do we bother to eat together as our ancestors did, or are we too busy? So 20% of meals in America before lockdown were being eaten in a car. And the question is, which of these ways of feeding ourselves actually ends up giving us a good life? And that is the really important fundamental question. Clearly, seems very clear to me, by not valuing food, we're killing ourselves and the planet. So we really have no choice but to value food again. It's ironic that historically it's been in times of crisis that people have valued food. So the Second World War, Havana after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Detroit after the motor cars left. And of course, we're going through another crisis now, and the same thing's happening. People are rediscovering the value of food. They're becoming good neighbors. They're cooking from home with their kids. New networks are growing up, joining producers to consumers. People are growing their own. These are all elements of resilience we can build, it seems to me, into a new Green Deal, if you like, at which food has to be at the center going forward. Seems clear to me we need to start working with nature, not against it. There are plenty of models, some of them are 5,000 years old, talking about how we do this. We have to become more politically engaged. So I love Carlo Petrini, that's the founder of Slow Food, his term co-producing. Basically, for example, community-supported agriculture, which is the idea that people in cities work with farmers directly and pay them in advance to grow their food, or food co-ops like this one in Brooklyn, founded 50 years ago now, where you just work in the city and do direct long-term deals with farmers, or organic box schemes, things like that. It's the idea that we're not just passive consumers of food, but we actually get actively engaged in feeding ourselves. Of course, there's huge implications for the way we inhabit land as well. So there's bioregionality, the idea that basically we can grow food in the city, but actually the city is always going to be fed to a certain extent from elsewhere. Embedding food in governance and in politics, making space for food in the city, infrastructure in the countryside, like local abattoirs, understanding the importance of that Lorenzetti image of the balance of city and country, and seeing what the latent capability of city hinterlands is, and the idea that you grow food where you can, but you never expect the city to feed itself, because that's the urban paradox. The city can never feed itself. This is my metaphor for good society. It's one in which everyone eats well. And if you say that eating well means that everybody gets to eat, not just the people who happen to have enough food, then you can go back, in a sense, to our egalitarian roots as hunter-gatherers. And good food is clearly food that hasn't despoiled landscapes, but has enriched landscapes, has given people good work. You know, animals have not been abused, if you like. So it's food that nourishes society and nourishes the planet. So I guess what I've hoped to give you in this very, very rapid run through of a very, very complex idea is the idea that food shapes our lives and our world and society. And if we learn to look through food and see the world through food, it's an amazingly powerful lens through which we can build together a better and a sustainable, resilient, and in the end, a good and happy future. And that's my book that was recently published, in which you can find out a lot more. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Sadly, with Zoom, you don't often hear the applause, but you can see it.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry, it was very rapid, but there we go.
No, I'm sorry if we put you forcing you to do so rapidly, but I think you've covered everything so beautifully, and it's such a perfect fit to, I think, the projects you're going to see in the next few minutes.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Good. Thank you, Carolyn. Well, hang around, and I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get straight on with the presentation from the urban living theme, and you're going to hear from those students. So remember them for later. Urban Moments with Zujiban and Jay Sun, and Knock Knock with Irene and Amog, Maida with Helen and Shamim, Andrew Sito's Graham's Guide, Common Ground with Kieran Dulé, and Lot with Asta Jury and Francesco Cagnola. We're going to run through the presentations, and then afterwards we can kind of take a breath and have a pause and talk to the students, and hopefully if Carolyn's still around, be really interesting to hear any comments from her and any thoughts from anybody. We'll be taking questions on chat at any time, and I can ask them at the end. And then if there's time after that, we'll put up the Zoom links that you can go and talk to the students individually in their little Zoom rooms. So let's go straight on with Urban Moments. Now I think Zoe and Jason are gonna, oh, let me just get out of that. I'm gonna stop screen sharing because you're gonna take over. Okay, over to you, Zoe and Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, we can see that.
Can everyone see properly?
Yeah, that's great. Carolyn, you might want to go on mute while all this is going on in case anyone charges across your room. Yep, that's working beautifully. Off you go.
Cool, thank you. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you for the amazing talk. Jason and I have seen one of your talks some months ago at the LSE, and just wow, thank you for joining us today. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our student presentations. And I'm Zuyaban. I'm a service designer with a background in communication design.
And hi, I'm Jason. I'm also a service designer with a background in spatial design. And today we'll be sharing our project on improving urban mobility with our project partner Visa. And this is a short sneak peek into our project, and here we go. So let us take you on a time travel back to the summer of 2019. And here we are at Bank Station. We've all been in this situation before COVID-19. The tube is packed every day, the same problem. It's crowded in the morning, crowded in the evening, people squeezing into the tube. And this experience creates discomfort and anxiety for the passengers. And transport providers are struggling with their demand management. Here you can see the two peaks of crowding on a typical weekday. And the problem will only get worse. According to the UN, 68% of the world's population is projected to live in cities by 2050. And by comparing these stats on where people live and where people work, we can see that a large number of people commute in and out of central London every day. And this is why we decided to focus on commuters in this project. Also, according to several city government reports, London's air quality is getting worse and worse, affecting Londoners' health. And moreover, Londoners are not active enough and at risk of obesity and other health issues. Londoners need to walk more. So the mayor's aim by 2041 is that every Londoner achieves at least 2 10-minute periods of active travel during the day. Also, walking is beneficial to the city in so many ways, starting from health, environment, community, space efficiency, and also to local economy. Just by Londoners walking 20 minutes a day would bring great benefits to the city, especially on health. £1.6 billion can be saved on NHS healthcare costs, and environmentally 57 kilograms of carbon can be saved up per year. And also it would help local economy, knowing that people who walk spend 40% more in town center than car drivers.
So with all of this, we asked ourselves, how might we encourage people to walk during peak hours in order to reduce demand on the public transportation network? With more focused research and interviews, we then looked at the different types of work commuters. We segmented them by these 3 parameters: time rich, time poor, more or less transport options, price sensitive or less price sensitive. In the end, we've identified 8 different types of people, and we prioritized those who are more time rich, as they are the ones who are more flexible so that they could delay their arrival home, for example, who have more transport options to choose from because they would have the choice to use active transportation, and who are quite price sensitive because they are the ones that would not take public transportation during peak times if they could get value out of it. And this brings us to Laurencio, a young professional working in Canary Wharf. He's single and he doesn't have kids. For him, the concept of getting home on time doesn't really exist. He likes to try new things and he's always on the lookout for new places to explore. Lorenzo complains about the fact that the tube is usually packed when going to work or coming back from work. We then continued looking at other stakeholders involved in urban mobility, and we found local shop owners like her. This is Jennifer, who's also a stakeholder of the city and also part of urban mobility. She recently opened a coffee shop a bit off the high street, and she doesn't have that much footfall. She's serving high quality coffee, however, people haven't really found out about her service yet. Now, she's looking for opportunities to advertise for her shop. And with all of this, let us now introduce you to our proposition in a short video.
Introducing Urban Moments, a service encouraging citizens to walk as part of their commute, while staying healthy and exploring local shops in the city. The user starts by signing in, using their existing account with their public transport provider, or creating a new account. They then allow the app to access their location and step count. On the Urban Moments platform, users can now access peak time crowding levels on the public transportation network. A notification reminds them to walk to avoid the crowd. At the beginning of the peak time frame, the step count is automatically activated and automatically deactivated at the end of it. As the user starts walking, the number of steps taken as part of their commute are automatically converted into urban points once they hit a set target. These targets are dynamic, based on the number of people who chose to walk as part of their commute. The more people choose to walk, the fewer steps the user will need to take to collect more urban points. If the user decides to walk on consecutive days, they are rewarded with bonus urban points, reinforcing their active travel behaviour. Now the user can spend their collected urban points to generate coupons and vouchers on the Urban Moments platform to access products, services and experiences at local shops. On the admin view of the Urban Moments platform, local shops can publish their offerings, scan and validate coupons. Urban Moments works as a platform for local shops to attract new and more customers into their shops. By encouraging people to move from public transport to active transport on the streets, the transport provider is reducing the demand on their network during peak hours. This results in a better experience of using public transportation. Urban Moments increases and rewards active travel behaviours in the city, creating a positive impact on citizens' physical and mental health. Step out, explore Urban Moments.
Quickly summing up on what values stakeholders are getting and giving. Through Urban Moments, users have now a way to explore local shops in the city in return for their active travel behaviors. The transport provider and the city are getting access to a platform to better manage the crowd and reduce demand on the network. To do that, they are feeding data on crowding levels to the Urban Moments platform so that we can notify passengers in advance. The city is also getting anonymized data and insights into citizens' walking behaviors, which could inform city infrastructure planning. And local shops are getting free access to a platform to advertise for their shops and potentially create extra value for citizens in the city. And lastly, by encouraging people to walk, Visa, the technology provider behind all of this, will be able to expect an increase in footfall for local shops, and this would affect their revenue from transaction fees. And this was a little sneak peek into our project. Please visit us in our Zoom room to find out more. We can't cover all the details in just 6 minutes. Thank you.
And back to you, Clive.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you, Zoe. As you just mentioned at the end of all the presentations, we'll be putting up a link so you can go and get in contact or make an appointment with anybody on these presentations here. So let me share my screen again, and we're going to see the next project, which is from Irene and Amog, and is called Knock Knock. So if you're there, bring yourself to the stage.
We're here.
Good stuff. Just want to say a quick thanks to Amog Lux for a fantastic interview with one of our alumni from Facebook that happened at 4 o'clock on Instagram Live. And every day we have, it'll be 11 o'clock tomorrow, we have our own graduates talking to previous alumni. And if you want proof of the power of service design and the impact it has, it's a really fascinating conversation. So well done, Amog. Thank you for that. Right, over to you when you're ready, and I'll be driving.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Big hello. Nice to virtually meet everyone. Irene and I are going to quickly run you through our project. And it starts with a simple statistic saying by 2050, 70% of the world's population is projected to live in some sort of an urban environment, cities, hybrid towns, something along those lines. And we were really interested, not yet, Clive, we were really interested in the social aspect of this. So for our final project, Irene and I investigated this trend to explore what the future of urban living could be. From our initial research, we found a very interesting correlation. Next now, Clive. And we found that population density is on the rise, while social cohesion is on a downward spiral. In 2018, approximately 9 million people in the UK said that they felt lonely. But it wasn't just that, it was also about access to community assets, access to services and people around them. So we knew that this was an important challenge for us to tackle. Next, please. We were fortunate enough to partner with a key stakeholder in the urban living ecosystem, a housing group, most specifically the Walsall Housing Group, with 24,000 homes focused on social housing. And importantly, they understood the importance of community cohesion and how it was beneficial for the residents, but also for the organization and the bigger Walsall community. Next slide, please. When we sat down with residents to get their perspective on this issue, we found that for most part, people feel disconnected from the larger communities around them. Next slide, please. So over the 6 months we worked on this project, we collaborated with a range of residents in Walsall, London, and stakeholders from WAG to explore one key idea, that if the future of urban living could be a more socially enabled, community-driven resident experience. And now in the next slide, next video, we'll present to you what we came up with.
Introducing Knock Knock, a service for WHG to foster a sense of community amongst residents. We know how stressful and lonely community life can be. It's tough to be a familiar face in the neighbourhood today. Meet Dominic and Margie. They're moving into a new home, and apart from the stress of the move, they don't know anyone in their new community and are worried that it might be tough to settle in. Then meet Denise. She has been a resident in Walsall for the last 5 years. While she knows the area, she feels quite lonely and wants to get connected with her community, but isn't sure how. That's where we come in. Our service provides tools to connect residents with their neighbours and community for greater access, sharing and collaboration. This means connecting with existing community initiatives or WHG initiatives, like the drop-in tea sessions, the treasure hunt and other resident services. Our digital platform gives them practical information about their buildings, local businesses and services they can access, and hyper-local recommendations of things to do and explore. They can also opt in for a social kit, which comes with items that can help them start conversations with their neighbours and other community members. They can use Knock Knock in many, many ways. Dominic and Margie use postcards from their social kit to introduce themselves to their neighbours. They then try out samples and discounts from the social kit to get to know local businesses around them. Denise uses the website to find community events. She joins a drop-in tea session at the Walsall Arboretum to meet other WHG residents and learn more about her community. Empowered by Knock Knock, the three of them get a better sense of their community, are able to connect with more people and feel like they are part of something bigger. But the story doesn't end there. Knock Knock makes access to community life easier for all WHG residents by providing a range of options for a more connected resident experience.
Next slide, please. So as you can see, our social kit provides a tool like a challenge card with a practical strategy so that nudge people approaching their neighbors in very different ways. So we learned that from our research, people like to get to know their neighbors and look out for each other and try to help them to build a better community. Next slide, please. So meanwhile, we also offer an online channel that encourages people to meet up with new community members. And also it's allowed them to kickstart conversations, how they can improve community life together or explore the new places they don't know yet. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to achieve here? We want to make a real change in the current community. That means residents can set up a new culture by using our tools and create an environment encouraging sharing, collaboration, and taking responsibility together. Next slide, thanks. So what kind of outcome we are looking at here? We not only consider improving residents' experience or optimize housing service, but also we partner with other community service like Health Watch, as well as local business. So we want to create a value exchange with these stakeholders and make community more resilient to change and strive. Next slide. Yeah, so thank you for listening, and that's all about us. And we will be happy to talk more about our process of work. So please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Amog. And thank you to Richard Haynes and all the team at WHG who've been such amazing partners to you both. We really, really appreciate it. And we're very lucky to have such fantastic partnerships. Right, the next project moves into a different aspect, more of the technology aspect that Carolyn set up in her massive global canvas at the start of this show. So Helen and Shamim, I'm hoping you're there. Hi. And we would love you to introduce your project, MIDA.
Of course. So I'm Helen and Shamim's on here as well. For our final project, we examine the future of digital identity in cities. Hi, Shamim. So we were exploring citizen control and engagement with their data. So next slide. And currently there are millions of sensors in every major city, which produce a staggering amount of data every millisecond. And as we move into more connected urban environments, digital identity is no longer primarily web-based. You know, it's further collected through your movement data, payment information, CCTV, and a plethora of other ways. And the current ecosystem is really such that private companies and governments collect data in silos, with citizens more as passive data points. And while our lives can certainly be improved through this, we're really indirect participants rather than a mutually beneficial stakeholder in this smart city power structure. Next slide. So in approaching this project, Shamim and I asked ourselves, how might we empower citizens to better understand and control their personal data so that they can make more informed decisions in an increasingly digital urban environment? Next slide. Let's see, Shamim's connection is bad, but.
So with our interviews and workshops, we found that people generally underestimate and lack knowledge about data collection, and that because there is no simple and engaging way to understand data, citizens feel that they can't exercise their data rights. Also, the lack of transparency and a sense of privacy generates low trust in institutions. And people still feel that there is room to create more privacy standards. And lastly, to feel empowered, they want transparency and a continually accountable relationship with institutions. And so in order to create that, transparency isn't enough. Control means a way to act. And in the case of data, it's the ability to opt out. So with all of this in mind, our service is MIDA, a digital assistant that helps people understand the personal impact of data collection and allows them to opt out where possible. So with all of that, giving understanding, empowerment, and control to individuals. So you have to skip 2 slides, sorry.
Sorry, has it skipped a slide?
Just go, that video is, if you hit
Yeah, you have to, yeah. Next one.
Okay, just let me bear with, because I'm just worried if the video maybe has slipped out. So I'm just going to find it for you. Just bear with me, everybody. Here it is. We just got out of order for some reason. Great.
Introducing MIDA. MIDA is a digital assistant that helps people understand the personal impact of data collection and enables them to opt out where possible. With the long-term vision of increasing citizen data empowerment in smart cities to create more proactive citizens. During onboarding, we begin our relationship with users by being transparent from the start. The email address and preferences shared will only be used to help users opt out. Next, we ask what data users are comfortable sharing so we can align those preferences with recommendations to opt out. Explain public and governmental data collection. Ask about data topics users are interested in learning about. And finally, we get permission to scan the computer to aggregate services used. If people aren't comfortable with this, they can choose to manually input apps and companies. MIDA has 2 main features on the homepage. First, a visualization showing the companies you use, the amount and types of data collected, and a color that designates the company's level of trustworthiness. Red is for companies that have less secure practices, and blue for companies that are trusted. The sensitive information breakdown lets you know specifically what is untrustworthy and why. Selecting the public view shows citywide public data collection projects to increase governmental transparency. The second feature on the homepage is a taskbar that highlights key actions to take to protect your data. Here you'll see untrustworthy companies flagged for review, as well as updates when companies change their privacy or T's and C's. We pull out the most relevant changes in a simple way so you can quickly understand the personal impact and make a decision to opt out. The first step towards data empowerment is educating citizens about the ecosystem they're inevitably a part of, and that's where our learning platform comes in. Every month, we explore data topics. Our learning modules consist of short, engaging animations and summary boxes, so you can more easily grasp the impact of data collection. As a preventative step, we've included a directory where you can search companies before you register with them. If the company you're looking for isn't trustworthy, then we'll show you suggested alternatives based on our data standards and your data sharing preferences. It's better to make an informed decision before you give your data away. MIDA, where you control your data.
So that's all. We just want to say thank you, and please reach out if you have any questions.
So if that's okay, we're going to come back to questions at the end, but well done. Thank you very much. Apologies for having a slide the wrong way around. Well, we got over it. Our next project is from Andrew, and we have a short video to introduce this project.
I'm Andrew Cito. For my project, I examined modern machines and how they could affect our everyday lives. Why I did that was so I could explore how we could live in a better technological-driven society. So what are modern machines? They are a vast system of interconnected tools. Some are physical, like your phone, others more digital, like Google, or even video calls. My project introduces this idea of digital beings. It's a state we adopt when we use modern machine. It sits on the edges of our physical and digital lives, and what happens in one usually affects the other. So think about all the things that you allow to happen in your digital lives that you wouldn't in your physical lives. Things such as allowing the mailman to open your mail, or putting a tracking collar on your children, or even letting strangers listen into your conversations. And we usually let all this happen because of the convenience technology brings. The trade-off would then be our privacy. I created Graham's Guide as a way to help us be more aware of what's happening. When we are more aware, we can then make more conscious choices that would grant us more freedom to live the life that we want. And we've created this awareness tips that we share through our social media channels and through an awareness campaign, Eyes on Device. The campaign is really about encouraging people to put googly eyes on their devices as a fun way to see their machines in a different light. Because our belief is that by being better digital beings, we can build a better digital culture so that we can live in a better technological-driven society. And all that starts with you. If you want to know more about my project, come chat with me. I'll see you soon.
Oops. Thank you, Andrew. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here, Clive.
Did you want to add anything else, or do you want to wait until the end?
I'll wait till the end.
I'd really like to ask you where I can get the googly eyes from, please, because they are sensational. Thank you. You can tell us afterwards. Thanks, Andrew. Great. Okay, well, let's keep going. No, we've had enough of you. Karen, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I am.
Fantastic. Great. Over to you with Common Ground.
Great. Thanks, Clive. So I'm Kieran, and I'm going to be sharing a snippet of a new initiative that I've been designing for the London Fire Brigade. So my work really started from an interest in services that function in these moments of extreme pressure, which is why I chose to look into the London Fire Brigade, and especially as recent events have substantially reshaped our perception of risk from fire. Next slide, please. So I spent time with firefighters learning how they train, what processes they follow, and I was shown how basic some of their systems are and how often they rely on pen and paper. And something that really came across time and time again is their drive to serve and protect the public. I started to become really interested in how I could add to the campaigns and services that you already have in place to try and work in line with their budgets, with an aim to ease some of the pressure off the fire brigade and reimagine their relationship with the public. Next slide, please. So I ran different simulations, getting people to act out what they would do in a fire scenario or explain what they'd done in the past when a fire occurred in their apartment blocks. I found using games like The Sims 2 or movie character cards made it more fun and inviting for people to engage with, for what was potentially quite an anxiety-inducing topic in an anxious time such as during a pandemic. It proved to be a really great platform to immerse people in different user journeys, and they engaged in conversations in different reflective states having embodied a sim. I learned that people hadn't considered what to do in a fire before, lacked familiarity on best steps, and actually most went against the London Fire Brigade's guidance and tried to fight the fire, which potentially would put them in harm's way. Next slide, please. So learning from experiences of people in fire scenarios, it became clear that while we have a huge amount of trust and respect for the London Fire Brigade, next slide, when it comes to our fire safety systems, this isn't the case. So this can be seen in how people don't read fire safety guidance, claim they would never stay put, and when they hear a fire alarm, tend to ignore it. Next slide, please. The impact of this is that people can find themselves in a moment of pure panic if a fire occurs in their apartment. They may never have used a fire extinguisher before, and people described that it was really hard to think clearly and logically in this state. Next slide. And for others in the apartment, while they may have first dismissed the alarm, that constant ringing can leave them feeling on edge, and without updated information, they could be left not sure what's happening and what they're supposed to be doing, which can lead to mistakes being made. Next slide, please. And for many people, these scenarios led to unintended moments, such as checking in the hallway to see if there was any sign of trouble, and maybe catch a neighbor doing the same thing, which might lead to them having a brief chat, sometimes for the first time. And it was interesting that there are these overlooked behaviors like this that hadn't been captured in designs before. Next slide, please. So is there a layer that we can add to the existing fire safety system to aid these moments and will potentially prevent them from happening in the first place? So a key change that I'm proposing with Common Ground is to shift from each household individually considering how they might prevent and react to a fire alarm, next slide, to the residents recognizing that their collective actions impacts the ability for fire services to do their work, so coming together in how they respond. By changing the scale at which we consider fire safety, it allows for better prevention and an organized response. Next slide, please. So there are 4 main components with Common Ground: additional support from the London Fire Brigade, advocates, rituals and tools. These reach residents at different stages of them living in an apartment, from an initial fire safety demo to give confidence with a potential stay put policy, to closing the feedback loop if a fire does occur. These design components independently bring value, but they're strengthened when implemented together. Next slide, please. So I've kind of designed for many touch points, but just to give an example of this, testing our fire alarms is something that we all know we should do, but many forget to. So by having a building-wide ritual whereby all residents test their alarms when the clocks change twice a year in spring and autumn, with support from advocate if needed, it reminds people what they should be doing at times when they start to expect it. Next slide, please. And in addition to this, because it always falls on a Sunday, advocates share activities around fire safety and prevention the residents can engage in either within their home or with their neighbours. So in the example shown, someone is testing if there's a fire on the other side of the door by using the back of their hand to check for heat, which prevents people from burning their hand on the door handle, which can lead to a bad injury. And sometimes while these injuries are small, they can actually have like a life-changing impact. And the aim here is really to change the format with which knowledge is shared and encourage people to practice, to try and reach more people who may not be able to reach it otherwise, because currently a lot of the information is written down, which some people can't access. Next slide, please. And something that I kind of found interesting is when exploring the different patterns between household and fires, it became clear that they're repeatable, and I see this as something which can inform which activities are run. So I've kind of in the background be compiling a pattern library for fire safety. And as part of what I'm working towards, I'm trying to see how this can deliver different value, which has really come from an inspiration from architecture and Christopher Alexander's pattern language. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Oh, there you are. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very, very much. And our final project of this session and this showcase on urban living comes from Asta and Francesco. And if you're there, we'll set you off. Great. Hello, welcome. Thanks for being patient.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Hi everybody. And well, as you will note, our project is hugely influenced by Carolyn Steele's work. And it was December when I went to the library to get Hungry City, her first book. And well, it's a great pleasure being in the same panel with her. And yeah, so London's Land Bank. And before to start, I and Asta, who is my partner, we wanted to leave you with something to think about before you hear from us. How do you feel about having access to green spaces near your house, if you have them? Next slide, please. We wanted to say that because at the moment in the UK, 3 million people don't have access to green spaces within 10 minutes radius from where they live. And this percentage is expected to rise in the next 10 years. This is due to urbanization patterns that have preferred big infrastructure and big roads over them. So after being considered the fundamental assets during the Digging for Victory campaign, green spaces have moved further and further down in the priority list. But in the last few years, we saw how them are going through a re-evaluation. Next slide, please. Natural capital accounting is a concept that has been explored extensively by the GLA, the mayor of London, in the last few years, and this concept tries to put a number against. So we are talking about economics economics here. Put a number against the benefits the green spaces bring to a resilient city. So this is bringing up how green spaces are fundamental in reacting to climate change for the physical and mental well-being of its citizens, and even possibly for its food security. So while these concepts have been around for almost a decade and more, among scholars and academics, COVID-19 brought this importance in everyone's life, probably even yours. So collaborating with the Camden Council, we have explored our belief that a resilient city is not a product of top-down policies, but are built together with its citizens. And we wanted to show you a video about the problem we encountered. Yes.
The growing interest of citizens in green spaces and biodiversity was evident in several citizens' assemblies that led to councils declaring formal climate emergencies.
Through our interaction with grassroots initiatives like Company Drinks and Incredible Edible Lambert, we found that despite creating high community engagement, grassroots initiatives still struggle to reach wider communities and suffer high volunteer dropout rates. We explored our initial insights in a multi-stakeholder workshop. Through provocative exercises, we narrowed down to random enforcement as main focus area. A range of experts helped us to understand how land management can be improved.
We saw how part of the population is very proactive in regards to public open spaces and their usage. From different voices, we heard two main problems: lack of transparency in land ownership and management models, and the absence of ways to meet and systemize the citizens' demand, causing clashes because of conflictual views on how to use such spaces. The outcomes are bitter relationships and neglected spaces.
We are not the only ones saying this. GLA's environment strategy reiterates the need for new ways to create and maintain green spaces.
So with this in mind, we would like to introduce you to our concept, which is LOT. LOT is a land management and a co-maintenance platform that leads to decentralized management and use of green infrastructure at the neighborhood level. Essentially, we enable citizens to take up stewardship of land patches in their local area and convert unused or neglected land into green microsites by bringing transparency in ownership and establishing land rights in the form of terms and conditions that are agreed upon by the landowners. We give citizens a way to contribute to the local biodiversity and also have the possibility of growing their own food. Next slide, please. So with LOT, we introduce three main features. LOT to do. So via a digital map, citizens can view the ongoing initiatives around them and find the right fit for them to volunteer or micro-volunteer. Adopt a LOT is a way for citizens to look at a list of land patches that can be claimed via presenting a deserved project plan. And ultimately, a LOT to say is a community forum to express your opinions and views about the multiple activities that are going on in the multiple lots around your house and in your neighborhood. By giving citizens and citizen groups easy and legal access to land within their neighborhood, we want to build a sense of belonging and ownership and this responsibility towards the area that you stay in, with the agenda of improving their appreciation of food, improving their physical and mental well-being, and strengthening the community cohesion. Next slide, please. Currently, we are planning a pilot for the service, and we're looking to collaborate with landowners. But in the future, we see LOT being actively used by citizen groups and both public and private landowners. For our long-term vision, we see LOT also being a readily available database for healthcare professionals. For example, link workers can use this or tap into our database for social prescribing. And with this, we come to the end of LOT, but if you want to know more and see more of our research and work, please drop into our Zoom room and also our website. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I think you'll agree, an absolutely extraordinary bunch of presentations. If you remember, we started with Jason and Zue talking about their urban moments. We went into the communities with Irene and Amog and their Knock Knock project. We heard from Maida, from Helen and Shamim, and Andrew looking at our digital management and digital behavior. And we ended up there with Kieran and fire protection or prevention. And finally, of course, Francesco and Asta with their project that reflected the influence of Carolyn. So Carolyn, thank you very much for hanging around to see those projects. I hope you enjoyed them. I'd be delighted to hear what you thought.
Well, I mean, you know, this is just very exciting for me because, you know, I think we're at an amazing crossroads in our trajectory as a society. We were already facing so many problems before COVID, and now COVID just kind of just sent it all into hyperspace. And, you know, we can either just kind of pack up and go home and decide it's all too much, or we can kind of use this as a sort of a spring forward. And I have to say, you know, listening to this sort of the amazing ideas and the amazing kind of energy in these projects just gives me so much hope, because, you know, the variety of thinking and the depth of thinking, and again, as I said in my introduction, you know, the fact that people are thinking, you know, on this course are thinking in such a kind of, you know, deep way about, you know, what problems we face as society, and looking, I mean, there's a wonderful term, I'm sure it comes up in a lot of your lectures and so on, acupuncture politics or acupuncture design, which was, I believe, originally coined by Jaime Lerner, who was the mayor of Curitiba in Brazil, and he had basically no money, but lots and lots of problems. And he just had this concept that, you know, if I just make a little incision here, you know, then all this stuff that's flowing in a bad way will suddenly start flowing in a good way. You know, I think I got that tingly feeling with all of these projects that they've got this kind of acupuncture potential, you know, because they're all really plausible that, you know, and it's so exciting. I mean, particularly Maida, I actually wrote in the chat, you know, I wanted to sort of just start using that now. It just looked like it already existed and it would be so useful, I think. But they're, you know, and Lot is fantastic that, you know, Francesca and Asta are actually about to do a pilot with Camden, you know, I mean, and I think, you know, a lot of the students are working already with real people and real bodies, and these are all very, very plausible projects, and, you know, they're all kind of ideas that sort of seem simple on the surface, but could really make a big difference. So I you know, I find that really exciting, and you know, I mean, in general, you know, I was jotting lots of things down as everyone was talking. You know, it's so topical as well. So many of the things that the students have been addressing, so for example, urban moments, you know, I mean, it's a fantastic idea, you know, and I sort of already wanted to sort of say, oh, have you thought of this, or are you doing this? Because, you know, but you are already doing so many things. But, you know, I think just as a way of getting people onto their feet and, you know, out of public transport and, you know, ultimately out of cars and taxis and so on, it's really, really fantastic. And it made me think of, I don't know whether Jason and, sorry, I'll just ask you, Clive, should I speak to all the teams directly and ask questions, or what would it be useful for me to do?
Well, we've got, I don't know if anyone else has got any questions as well, do pop it into the chat or just join in the fun.
Well, just congratulations from me, really, on 6 absolutely amazing, very inspiring, very plausible projects. And, you know, I loved all of them, basically. And I can say more, but we can chat. We can chat generally if anyone has anything they want to say.
Yeah, I think what I might do is I might just wind up this sort of more formal part, but we'll just keep this show open so people can talk more generally. I would like to put up the links to all the individual Zoom rooms, and I'm not sure where it is. I don't know if one of the team can repost that in the chat. That would be great if you've got it.
Yeah, I've just did it.
Francesco, yes, did you want to say something?
Asta just did, is in the chat already, the link.
Oh, fantastic. So you'll see there, the RCA service design comms speak to the designers for urban living. and that will take you to a page that shows you the individual links of the 6 teams you've seen here. So you can go and have private conversations. You can leave this Zoom and then go on to that. So I'd encourage anybody on this call, and there's lots of people on the call. It's very nice to see you, Richard Haynes. Hello, for the fantastic help you provided Irene and Amog for the Knock Knock program. They're giving a little cheer there. I think I said it briefly, but Carolyn, just almost responding to your comments just then, I was always blown away observing the service design course, and now here I am deeply entrenched in it, at the pragmatism and the reality. You know, these are not fantasy projects.
Yeah.
I think your comments are very, very well taken, that these, as you say, they're very real.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, all of them just feel like, I mean, some of them almost feel like they should already exist or could already exist, and some of them clearly are about to. And as I said, you know, they're all low-hanging fruit in terms of being such good. So, you know, in a way, they would be so simple to put into action, but would have such enormous impact. Yeah. You know, so this is always a win in design. You know, it's always the really simple thing that you look at it and think, well, why didn't somebody else think of that first? You know, it's kind of, you know, they all have that tingle factor to me that, you know, it's sort of, yeah, this really, really, really makes sense. It's addressing a really major problem and it would work. So let's do it. I mean, you know, huge congratulations to all of you for coming up with such fantastic ideas.
I'm going to wind up the slide bit of the presentation, because I'm sure there's lots of good people who want to go and have their dinner as well as talk to students and the like. So just to tail this presentation, I do think these students are amazing. I agree with every word Karen's just said, and we'll carry on the conversation afterwards. But when I arrived in September, we wanted to somehow capture the ethos, understand what the ethos of the course was. And Andrew, in fact, ran the project with a designer in the first year to create this language of icons that captures, I think, the things that are important and that I use to describe this cohort of students, especially this one, this 2020 cohort. You have to be curious to be a good service designer. You have to be courageous to tell the truth to people, to let them see how things really are. And that's one of the great jobs service designers do. We collaborate, you know, we're not egos. We're trying to make things happen collectively. They're very dynamic students. They're very innovative, and they're here to transform. They're not here to let be. They're not here just to say, oh, well, never mind. They want to change the world, and they want to change the world from a human-centered point of view. They care about people, and increasingly from a planet-centric, this huge ecosystem of which we are only a part, not just the center. And I think you've seen from all 6 projects, the purpose they put behind. They want to change the world, and I entirely believe they will do. This has been the first of this amazing festival. We have events coming up on health and finance tomorrow with Martin Dowson. It's all a bit out of order on this slide, from Lloyds Bank, and Andy Wilkins from Future for Health on Wednesday, and a seminar on Thursday with Julian Thompson, who as well as running Design for Citizens Advice, also runs Roots in Design, and he'll be talking to us about Black Lives Matter. This is about, where do we go next? Where do we go out of pandemic? Where do we go post Black Lives Matter, post Extinction Rebellion, post pandemic? There's a lot of things we want to talk about there. So this whole festival goes on for this week and next week. It's going to be a busy time, but an incredibly inspirational time for us all. You can find on our website all the particular events, including the earlier on 11 o'clock Instagram alumni conversations. This is the year of 2020. It's been absolutely extraordinary. This is what they looked like 2 years ago when they arrived. We're going to have a chat with them now. But you can, as we say, you can go and press on the link and you'll get all these Zoom links, and that will take you so you can actually talk to them. So for those people who need to push off, I completely understand. But do take a moment. Do take a moment to talk to our students. And if you don't do it now, take a copy of that page, keep it on your browser, and at any time send them a connect to Zoom and see if they're there. And there's a Calendly function there as well, where you can set up a meeting to talk to them. I think they're extraordinary students. I hope you agree. And anyway, over to you guys now. We can carry on the conversation. Exactly, a round of applause. Normally we turn all our mics off and have a round of applause. But thank you so much, Carolyn. I think we probably will lose a few people now, but those people who are hanging on, thank you very much. And I don't know whether any of you students have anything you'd like to ask Carolyn, and likewise, Carolyn, back to any of the projects. Please do feel free. And if any of you get an invitation to go to your Zoom rooms, we'll understand it if you push off there.
I mean, I think a general question I'd be really interested to, I mean, so many of the projects, I mean, this was very true of Urban Moments, I mean, all of them, to be honest. They're so topical, but also halfway through the COVID happened, you know, which must have just been a total nightmare. So I'd be really interested to hear from anyone, how was it like when COVID happened and you suddenly thought, oh, you know, my goodness, is my project still relevant? And then you thought, well, maybe it's more relevant than ever or something like that. Does anyone have a particular reaction to that experience?
Go on, be brave.
Don't shy.
Maybe Irene and I can go first. I think what's really interesting is we're looking at social cohesion. And one of the first things that came with the pandemic was social distancing.
Yeah.
But during that time, we were also running workshops and talking to people, and we just found an increased openness. It's kind of like what you had in one of your slides about being more neighborly.
Yes.
And we just saw that whole thing was opening up, and what people were apprehensive about, now they were actually more keen on doing, especially with connecting with their community members.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, I've met lots of people who've said that their streets have developed a WhatsApp group and they're kind of sharing knowledge and all of this kind of thing. I mean, you know, again, that must have happened, you know, you must have been thinking, wow, that's kind of echoing what we're already talking about or something. I mean, how did you adjust, or did you just sort of say, oh yeah, and now the world's just doing what we're already talking about, or how did you react to that?
I'll go first. Irene can join. Actually, our project partner that I don't know if he's still online, but they had a party outside, and then they formed a WhatsApp group, which led to a crowdfunding for something, which led to supporting people with something. But what we did was, I think it gave us sort of more strategic strength, because our project's looking at more practical value from connecting, sort of sow the seeds for social cohesion. So I think it bolstered the idea, but it gave us more chance to go a bit deeper into the actual artifacts we were making.
No, I mean, it sounds like an absolutely brilliant idea. And, you know, I think the fact that it's a platform, as you say, so it becomes like a public space you can enter, because I mean, WhatsApp is basically a communication tool, but what you're creating is actually a sort of a public platform that kind of exists in, my terminology is a bit old-fashioned, but you know, in cyberspace, and you know, it's very welcoming, feels very well. I mean, you know, if it existed in my street, I'm sure I would use it. So I really hope you do take it forward. It sounds really fantastic.
If it starts, we'll send you an email.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it. And I mean, same with Urban Moments, Jason, if they're still there. I mean, I just thought, you know, it must be so surreal. You're kind of, you know, you're trying to deal with public transport being too crowded, and all of a sudden nobody's on it. I mean, that just must have been weird. Did you panic?
So basically, yes, because like normally we would go out and like try the tube on a peak time and then see how many people are there actually and what the experience is like. Like we would like to see that, capture it, but we couldn't do that. And stuff got worse. I kind of flew back to Korea. So we were working in 2 different time zones.
Wow. Yeah.
Korea is in Germany. So with our partner Visa, they were in London. So we had to work around like 3 different time zones, which was some experience.
Yeah. Wow.
Then project-wise, I think we see COVID-19 as a tragedy, of course, but also as opportunity, since people now kind of are looking for safer ways to move around the city. So it's a good time to implement our service when people are voluntarily walking and get into that rhythm and style of commuting.
Yeah.
If they get so we've earned, like not earned, but if we now have that time for people to adapt to our service rather than throwing our service into a stage where people are busily like going, just focusing on speed. Now more on safer ways to go around the city. I think we see it as an opportunity in that sense.
Yeah, I really agree with you. And I mean, of course, you know, there's so many issues to do with what city centres are going to be for going forward, because, you know, and nobody's going into the city at the moment. And, you know, there's so many businesses that are just desperate for people to come and visit. So, I mean, I think, you know, actually your app's got more apt than ever, frankly, as a result of COVID. Yeah, I really agree with you. I was just thinking, it's quite interesting. I was listening to a program yesterday. I don't know whether you know the comic David Sedaris. He's very funny. It's kind of very sardonic American comic. But anyway, he was saying he's got this kind of Fitbit thing on his wrist, and he's so competitive that he now he goes for a long walk at midnight so he can get the first half of his 10,000 steps in before he goes to bed, you know, because it works by day. So I just thought, you know, the whole psychology of motivation is so interesting. And I think it's brilliant the way you're almost playing on human behavior and kind of going, well, yeah, if you do 2 days in a row, it kind of doubles up and everything. I mean, you know, I think you have dangerous insights into the way our brains work, but it's really brilliant thinking. So thank you for that.
There's actually one more thing I would love to add to what Jason just mentioned. Of course, COVID-19 was also a huge opportunity for us to be more creative. So just imagine prototyping urban mobility solutions in times of lockdown, sitting here at home in front of our screens. So we had to come up with really creative ways to prototype things. And for example, we used Google Street View and WhatsApp to play out scenarios and to augment information. So I'm guessing it was the case for all of us students. It definitely boosted our creativity.
Yeah. And, you know, you feel it. I mean, I wouldn't have known, you know, that any of these presentations were done, you know, with you all having to work from different time zones and not really being able to go out. I mean, you just did an amazing job of inventing ways of getting the stuff done. I mean, they all look really professional and slick. So yeah, it's really interesting. So, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I mean, both Urban Moments and Knock Knock, you had the same kind of problem. You're sort of dealing with something literally, and then COVID drops a bomb in the middle of what you're doing, but you cope magnificently. I mean, MIDA, of course, is really interesting because that's become really topical with all of, you know, the track and tracing. I mean, it just could not be more topical. Helene and Shamim still here? They're not. Okay. Well, anyway, I mean, again, incredible sort of topicality with that one. And I'm trying to read the book Surveillance Capital. Oh, you there's Shamim. Yeah, Shamim. Hi. I mean, again, you know, the same question really. You must be thinking with all this track and trace kind of controversy. You know, well, we were here before anybody caught up with this stuff, and it's fantastic. Yeah. Were you motivated by the Zuboff book, the Surveillance Capitalism book? Was that what kicked you into this, or I can't even remember when that came out? Was it before you did your work, or did that feed into your work?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily, but we had the discussion actually that we were talking about how, like, right now we were doing all of our projects over the internet, and then sorry, do you have can you hear me?
We can hear you, Shani.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My connection is really bad.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, it comes in parcels.
Okay. Yes, so with the track and trace and with all of we're talking about how the privacy of information of people would fit. So we were discussing the near future, which everything becomes connected, but actually we were living in it kind of. So that was really interesting. Yeah. So we're trying to make a balance between how can we, because we were discovering future scenarios, and we had to like backstage and then come to current situation and try to implement some solution that it would fit into the current world. So I think that was a bit hard and challenging to make it, like backstage it to now, and make it to become balanced.
Well, I mean, I think it's always a wonderful feeling when you're designing something and the kind of the world catches up with what you're already doing. You know, that's always a good sign. I mean, as I said, I think of all the projects, yours was the one where I was almost kind of going, you know, can I use this now, please? You know, I mean, have you approached anyone about partnering and actually putting this thing into practice?
We haven't yet, but with our interviews, we had expert interviews with Theo Blackwell. So we were wondering to kind of go back and present him the project and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important at the moment because, you know, I mean, basically, you know, again, so many of your projects are sort of actually talking about how there's been a breakdown in public life of some level, you know, whether it's communities not talking to each other or people not trusting their fire safety. And you're creating, in a way, sort of digital platforms where, you know, people can go, but ultimately it's actually about how we live together, you know. So these are deep social issues, and you know, it really couldn't be more topical, I think, to sort of increase trust and transparency in the digital world, because it's arguably our greatest threat at the moment, you know, that we can't work together. You know, we've got plenty of existential threats out there like climate change and mass extinction and no jobs, but if we can't find, you know, means of communicating together and getting information that we trust, we're screwed. So I mean, you know, it's a really, I mean, and yours is not the only project that's addressing this, but I think, you know, congratulations. I think it's really feels very topical, and I'm sure you will get interest to put it into practice. Graham's Guide to Digital Being. Where are the eyes? Where's Andrew?
He's there. Is
he there?
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I have a very I have a very strange relationship with technology, because, as you can probably tell, I was kind of born before any of this stuff existed, and I definitely don't kind of relate, you know, to the kind of Alexas of this world, shall we say. But I think if I stuck eyes on one, I might actually start to bond. But what gave you the idea? What gave you the idea for kind of, in a way, humanizing, I guess, the digital interface?
Yep. So in my research, I was looking at how people interact with a lot of their machines, and what I realized was we kind of don't have a relationship with them. We take our phones, we use them, and then we just chuck them aside. Every year we upgrade them. But what stronger like social relationship with them, we might learn not to abuse it so much. We spend less time on our phone. We then talk to more people instead of just texting them. So I think small bits like that were the genesis or inspiration to build the project. And also, like, everyone's always talking about how all these devices are spying on us. So I thought, why not just exaggerate that fact? And if you put eyes on your Alexa and you know it's spying on you, then you probably push Alexa away when you have a private conversation. Yeah.
And I think also, again, I mean, that your project in that sense, you know, it's got echoes with other projects like Common Ground, for example, which is all about sort of saying, how can we use design to alert people to something that's going on? So yours, in the say, is the sort of the suspicion of being spied on. And, you know, Kieran's Common Ground project is like the sort of the, you know, the suspicion that the building, you know, fire regs don't really work and they're not really safe, and trying to break down this barrier that we have with the digital world we've created. I mean, I think it's really important. And by the way, could go a lot further, you know, because I mean, I think, you know, something I would say is that, you know, computers and sort of technical devices and so on, they've evolved this kind of look, you know, which is all to do with their kind of slickness, or, you know, their beauty or their utility in a way. But actually, we live with these things, you know. So I think sort of, you know, the whole idea of how do we redesign the sort of the human tech interface so that we're both more conscious of the fact, you know, that we're dealing with these objects the whole time, and also that we sort of become as you say, I mean, more aware that actually there's human to human contact and there's machine contact. And you know, I think your eyes could be the beginning of something really big, I think is what I'm saying.
They're brilliant.
Yeah, they're brilliant. Yeah,
Thank you.
They're so simple.
I think it can grow a lot bigger. This is just the genesis of like a small movement that I'm trying to build. The hard thing I realized about digital technology, it's so new. A lot of us don't know what tech is doing to us or what it will do to us.
Yeah.
So what I was really trying to find was like, how can you prevent an accident before it even happened when you can't even see the parts that are broken?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of effective and it's rather kind of cute at the same time. So I think you've aced it. Well done.
Thank you.
And is Kieran still here? Common Ground?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. No. Congratulations. I mean, I think I love. Again, it's not dissimilar to what Andrew was doing. I love the use of cartoon characters to help people just kind of get into, okay, which of these people do I identify with? I mean, that's a brilliant way of getting people to address something that's, you know, in the end feels so abstract. I mean, I think we've all walked past a fire extinguisher in a corridor and kind of thought, I hope I never have to activate that because I wouldn't have a clue, you know. And as I said to you in my chat comment, I mean, just sort of the idea of using a threat in a way to bring people together is just so brilliant. I mean, you know, because actually in a weird way, historically, as we know, it's crises that have brought people together. So what was the genesis of that idea?
It kind of came about from like multiple conversations that I was having with people. And I think when I first started to engage people in fire safety, the reaction was, it doesn't really impact me. You shouldn't be talking to me. I'm not the right person. Or this is a bit of a dull topic. So I think part of me was a bit like, how do I make this interesting for the people that I'm having conversations with? And how do I really start to involve them in this? So part of that was just me building extra little artifacts to bring along so that people could just almost like have a starting point of a conversation. And I think, as you said, kind of having like a movie character card, that was just trying to get people to express how they felt in a certain moment. And especially for people that have been in a fire scenario, it could potentially be quite traumatic for them to kind of go back through. And just kind of having something that they could kind of point to or prompt to that meant they can kind of like end that conversation if they wanted to, or kind of use that to kind of build further on, I think really helped. But it was a kind of challenging time to be talking about danger when obviously there was a much bigger danger going on in the background.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it was kind of interesting to navigate.
Try it out on a real housing block before lockdown happened?
No, sadly not. So I think that's the next plan, really.
That's what you really must be desperate to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, could you even try out the cartoon characters on Zoom with people, or was that just kind of too weird? You did try that, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've kind of tried different things. So I think that was part of the reason why I kind of switched to a gaming platform at one point, because you could get people just to kind of navigate through buildings and through spaces. And like on The Sims, you could kind of artificially start a fire. So you can kind of see how people react. And then I guess through like different Google Slides, you could kind of pre-map out scenarios or just get people to react and move things around, which helps. But it's never quite the same if it's not in a real building, I don't think.
No, I mean, it'd be so interesting to literally run it, you know, as a sort of ongoing process in a couple of apartment buildings or something, and just do a before and after, you know. I mean, I've done this again with food. I mean, not personally, but I mean, I've seen presentations where people have looked at the kind of and again, this goes back to Knock Knock, actually, looked at sort of the number of people who knew each other in a housing estate, and then they put a community garden in. You know, well, of course, it replies to lot as well. I mean, this is 3 of the projects, and then come back a year later, and literally it's been transformative because people have had a reason to get together. And, you know, you have a chat about, you know, which end of the corridor you're going to run out of in a fire, and before you know it, you're coming around for a cup of tea. You know, I mean, I think it's a great idea. Did you approach the fire brigade with it? Were you working with them on it?
Yeah, so I was working with them. So originally it kind of started from me kind of joining them a lot at the fire station. And actually, I think COVID kind of happened at an awkward moment when I was going to start joining them on kind of visits they do into people's houses, where they actually point out a lot of the safety, and they were going to give me mini demos of what they do.
And that's
obviously for them, Yeah, and for them, obviously, their big focus was actually we're an emergency service. This is our priority, and actually, me joining them could be a potential threat.
Yeah.
So it was then trying to just take a while just to refocus or repivot to try and see like how could I still develop this.
But were
hopefully
they interested? I mean, did they think it sort of sounded like it could work?
Yeah, so they're really, so I've had like conversations with them, and I'm hoping to kind of pick it up again. Just to see how we can start to take things forward. And I think actually one of the things that I was really interested in is a lot of their focus is on like potential people who may need additional support, which meant the kind of general community or general public didn't really get any additional support. So actually looking at, can we have a community approach to fire safety, and what does that change in the way they deliver services?
Do you know what this reminds me of? I had a friend who used to be a milkman. You're probably all too young to even know what that is, but you know, in the good old days, you know, the sort of distribution of milk was centralised, and you used to have electric vans going down the road, and they'd literally stop outside every door and deliver your milk. And then they started doing bread and orange juice and eggs and stuff. But what was really interesting is this friend of mine, he was doing some quite dodgy parts of London. And he would find that, you know, he'd go and knock on a door, and he was somebody that came regularly, and so many people were lonely and isolated. So I think this relates to at least 3 of the projects. And they would, and a little old lady would sort of say, would you mind taking my post, you know, my postal order to the post office, because they were too scared to go out, or they couldn't walk or something. And he, in the end, he was literally, you know, buying something for one old lady, taking somebody else's postal order, sending notes from one resident to the other. He became like a sort of a social service. And it was just so interesting. And he said it was absolutely brilliant, by the way. You know, he was a young man then, and he just really loved connecting people and helping people. So I think, you know, you're really, I mean, you, and again, Knock Knock and Lot, you're all in some ways bringing back this thing. You know, we need, I mean, what brings us together is what, you know, what our common necessities actually. So food, safety, you know, just basically staying alive, health. And I think tapping into that is completely superb. So, well, good luck. I'm sure, you know, I look forward to hearing how it develops in the next year when you're allowed out and about again.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep you in the loop.
Please do that. And I hope everybody will do that as well. And then Lot, which obviously I have a sort of special affinity with because it's kind of my world. But I mean, and in fact, we had a chat about this a few months ago, and I tried to link you up to the GLA, but they never got back to me, I'm afraid. But you've linked up with Camden anyway, so that's fantastic. So, well, I obviously love this project. So congratulations. And again, I mean, you know, were you able to sort of carry on? Did COVID scupper you halfway through? Or were you sort of pretty much able to do what you wanted to do with it?
No, I think the COVID worked in our favor in many ways because it amplified the fear people had about running out of food or just not having access to food. And even Grow Your Own community kind of came really alive at the same time, and lots of people wanted to grow. So in terms of access to talking to some of these people and prototyping, even if it was digital, we were able to do it remotely. And we had kind of built in a good relation with some of the grassroots initiatives that we were working with. And we had an okay relation with the council as well. I think the challenge for us was how do you strengthen the relation with the council, because their priority had entirely changed and was now focused on.
Yeah.
So we would have liked them to be a lot more engaged with what we were doing.
Yeah.
But let's hope we now get to build that back again once.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, as you say. I mean, of course, you know, as I said in my presentation at the start, I mean, growing food is something that people have got a lot more interested in under lockdown. So on that level, absolutely, let's hope that Camden and other councils, and indeed the GLA, see the benefit of this, because I think, you know, it is a moment we'll never get back, but, you know, it's a moment when people have slowed down enough to see that actually, you know, doing real stuff locally and growing food and cooking food can be the heart of a good life. So that's very exciting. Yeah. And
Thank
well
you.
done for getting Camden on board. I mean, I tried to get many, well, I did a lot of buildings in Camden when I was being an architect, and I have to say they were a total nightmare to work with usually, but I'm really delighted they can see the value of your project. So,
To be honest, we're still chasing them in many ways.
Okay. Yeah,
I think Noel Hatch in Camden has left, sadly, but maybe not. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do apologise. I mean, I was obviously in the planning department, but actually, which bit of this council are you working with, out of interest?
We were closely working with Camden, and then we have other people that we were speaking to, experts who are trying to now get us in touch with other councils. So Lambeth.
But in which bit of the councils? Was it planning or?
Oh, right. No, Fra, do you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, just well, many parts of it actually. Before we were joined by the environmental services, I don't know if he's a senior member of the senior officer, but he left. And well, we were working with them. We touched base with Green Spaces, is the guy that we are chasing, and what else?
Sustainability team.
Sustainability and the citizen engagement.
And the citizen engagement. But we're also looking at private landowners now.
Yeah. No, scale up. Think big.
We know that WHG is looking at green spaces.
Sorry?
Nothing. I was like leaving it a hint for Richard, that is a MOG's project partner that works for WHG.
Okay.
Yes,
so,
he's on it.
Richard works. Who do you work for, Richard? Sorry.
Oh, there.
Oh, you're on mute, Richard. There you go.
WHG. Also.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, perfect. Beautiful. Yeah.
Very close.
Well, I mean, this in itself, this group is a platform, isn't it, for cross-fertilization as well? Because, I mean, frankly, everyone, I mean, you know, as Clive said at the beginning, everyone's just trying to make a better world, and it's all connected. End of. It's all connected. It's all about people and nature and how we, you know, connect strongly with each other and with the world, the natural world. And it, you know, I found this an incredibly inspiring, you know, couple of hours, I guess it is. And you know, I really wish all of you the very best. I'm sure, please do stay in touch with me if you want, and let me know how you're getting on. Let me know if I can help. Richard's just offered some land to Francesco and Asta, so that's wonderful. And let's do deals and do it, build a better world. Fantastic.
Carolyn, I think you're right. I think we have been going nearly 2 hours now, so I think we'll probably, I can see our viewing list slowly going down. But I just want to say a few thank yous before we do sort of draw to a close. Carolyn, you have been absolutely magnificent. Thank you very much. You brought us enthusiasm and energy, which we were probably slightly lacking from the last few weeks getting ready for the show. It's been such a lovely way to kick off, and actually this format's worked fantastically, the student presentations and then just talking like this. Thank you for showing us the way. Tell your friends, anyone in government or anywhere else, tell them please. Anyone on the call, tell your friends about these amazing students. I am so, it's not ready for me to say they are amazing. You know, we just gave them a platform to be amazing on, but I think the projects are just extraordinary. And these 6 projects we've seen tonight, well, more than 6, how many of you there are. It's been just a joy to watch you forming your projects, and it's been fantastic to see you present them, and thank you so much for your comments. Carolyn, yeah, this is the first one. We got 2 weeks of this, so blimey. And I've got transatlantic calls coming up in half an hour, so it never ends. But you've all been absolutely fantastic. All the people that have joined us, I've seen people from you know, future employers. I've seen our students. Thank you for coming along and watching the work of the graduates, and students who are coming to the RCA, students who are joining us at the end of September as well. Thank you for taking part in this. I hope you've been utterly inspired, as I have been really since the day I got here in September, and it's just got better and better. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. I think I'm going to close it down, if that's okay with you guys. Hopefully you've still got the links to rooms and you can get in contact with all the students you need to. But just finally, again, thank you, Carolyn, the most magnificent start to our Festival of Better Ideas. Thank you so much. Good luck for your book. And we will all be talking to you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and huge congratulations to everyone. It's been really great. Good luck.
Fantastic. Lots of love on the chat. Thank you very, very much. All right. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Take care. See you tomorrow.
Bye.